Hey guys, tonight we drift back into the mists of stone tools and orchard groves, where you trudge through dew-slicked fields hunting the first glimmers of something soft, lustrous, almost too fine to be real. You probably won't survive this midnight trek through tangled mulberry trees, unless you've got a sturdy pair of shoes and a sense of wonder that's tougher than hardened clay. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments so we can see who's awake with us. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. From the sleepy cradle of Neolithic China, around 3000 BC, silk first teased human hands. At sunup, you crouch beside farmers picking mulberry leaves, the single food source for Bombyx mori caterpillars. Mainstream history tells us that Chinese villagers mastered sericulture long before any other civilization dared to match its sheen. Imagine those early threads, hot off the cocoon, so precious you'd trade a sheep for a single spool. And here's a fringe tidbit. Some ancient tombs held silk fibers wound into tiny knots, believed to be magical 3D puzzles warding off restless spirits. Historians still argue whether wild silkworm silk was used before full domestication, but either way, you can almost hear those first silken whispers in the dusk air. As dawn breaks, the idea sparks. If silk can cross a basin in China, why not beyond? You wander westward, crowdsourcing rumors of fragile cloth on the wind. Maybe you spot an early trader, wafting through a village like an itinerant bard, carrying silk scraps as currency. He jokes, "Keep it away from the dogs, Fido won't appreciate haute couture." His voice is gentle sarcasm against the hum of insects. That overland exchange began carving faint trails through hills and valleys. By 2000 BCE, small pockets of silk cloth have surfaced in Indus Valley sites. Historians still argue whether those bolts were imported or spun locally, but you feel the thrill, textiles weaving invisible bridges across deserts and foothills. The landscape isn't all golden sunshine. You trudge through bamboo groves where rain drips in hollows, muffling your footsteps. Here, silk production happens in secret family compounds, doors bolted against imperial inspectors. Legend says that Empress Leizu discovered silk when a cocoon landed in her tea, one of those slightly embarrassing you spit your tea out moments. In truth, archaeologists found silk fragments in tombs dating back thousands of years, confirming that silkworm cultivation was state-sanctioned hush-hush for centuries. You can almost taste the iron tang of government paranoia on your tongue. By the second millennium BC, gossip spreads of silk moving by foot and mule, little more than rumor until caravans swell into well-worn paths. You walk among them, caravan masters calling yakadik to stragglers, hacking camel bells that ring like distant laughter. One trader confides a fringe rumor. Late at night, caravans used silk sacks as makeshift pillows, believing the moth-resistant fibers whispered protective prayers against scorpions and vipers. Scholars still debate whether those superstitions drove innovation or simply kept weary travelers from kicking off blankets in a panic. You pause, imagining the soft sheen of silk glowing under lantern light, creatures skirting around bundles, all in a quest for comfort in a harsh world. As dusk settles into violet shadows, you catch the faint silhouette of an early outpost, mud brick walls etched with pictographs showing silkworms and nomads together. That's a mainstream fact. By 1500 BCE, Central Asian oases blossomed into trade hubs. But here's the quirky part. Some frescoes depict silkworms wearing tiny hats, perhaps a playful prank by bored artisans. You laugh softly at the thought, letting the gentle absurdity cradle your mind. You remember the jockey hat-wearing worms with a smile, a cozy mental pillow. Finally, You see where the first overland routes cement their namesake, roads braided like silk itself. In places, the forest canopy closes overhead, muffling hoofbeats until you almost drift asleep standing up. Yet you keep going, because this is where the story of human ambition and softness intertwines, from those Neolithic farmers to caravan masters marching under endless stars. And now, as your eyelids droop, you feel the ancient threads guiding you forward, toward tales yet to be told. You press onward into the jade-green haze of eastern hills, the memory of those tiny, hat-wearing worms still softening your thoughts. A low mist curls around ancient pavilions where imperial messengers once proclaimed silk was a state secret, so confidential you'd think they were guarding dragon eggs. You trudge beneath stone arches stamped with looming dragons, feeling the weight of centuries-old paranoia settle like dew on your shoulders. You probably didn't pack a loyalty oath, but rumor says the penalty for unlicensed sericulture was face tattooing, ancient permanent ink, courtesy of the Han dynasty. Harsh? Maybe. Decorative? Only if you fancied sporting a giant calligraphic S across your cheek. Mainstream records confirm that by the 2nd century BCE, the Han emperors tightly controlled silk production, banning its export under penalty of death. Silk workshops lay hidden behind palace walls, doors bolted, guards stationed like human bookmarks in a royal library. You step quietly past one such workshop, the air tinged with warm, damp cocoon fragrance, an aroma described in dusty scrolls as the scent of spun moonlight. It wraps around you, almost lulling you to nap on a stack of uncut silk bolts. Legends whisper of smugglers who smuggled silkworm eggs out of China in hollowed bamboo walking sticks. One tale says a daring mother cat served as accomplice, whisking eggs in her fur-bred underbelly. Fringe scholars still debate whether such feline espionage actually happened, but you can't help smiling at the mental image of a cat wearing a tiny silk satchel and practicing undercover maneuvers. Historians still argue whether silk eggs traveled in bamboo or were hidden in hollowed scarves dyed to match merchant robes. As you round a bend, you spot a broken watchtower overlooking a narrow pass. You imagine imperial inspectors pacing at the top, eyes trained for suspicious backpacks or stray whispers of cocoon-scented wind. You lean against the mossy stone and run your fingers over carvings, a stylized worm, legs removed, symbolizing its domestication. A local farmer once told you monks brewed silkworm tea to ward off evil gossip, believing each sip granted poetic inspiration or polite hiccups. You chuckle to yourself, tea that inspires haiku or an embarrassing hiccup during court poetry reading sounds equally dramatic. Your journey continues, footsteps echoing through a corridor of bamboo shoots that seem to sway with gentle encouragement. You can do it. Just keep walking. Beneath their emerald canopy, you catch a faint scratched inscription on a rock, Smuggler's Rest, complete with a crude arrow pointing deeper into the gorge. You follow it, wondering if someone truly used this as a clandestine meeting spot or if it's an elaborate tourist trap designed centuries later to confuse modern wanderers. Either way, the idea tickles your imagination. At dusk, you arrive at a secluded village where the houses huddle in shaded courtyards. Lantern light flickers across mud walls, casting dancing silhouettes that look like mischievous silkworms performing a shadow puppet show. You offered a steaming bowl of millet porridge, its gentle sweetness a welcome contrast to the day's kaleidoscope of rumors. The villagers exchange whispered tales of an imperial decree so strict that entire lineages died out, some say because their ancestors defied the ban and tried setting up backyard silkworm farms. Historians still argue whether those crackdowns actually extinguished certain sericulture lineages or if local traditions simply faded under economic pressure. Night deepens and you lie on a patchwork straw mat outside a bamboo shack. Crickets chirp with hypnotic regularity, like a metronome ensuring your breath doesn't drift too far from the present. In the distance, you hear a lone fiddle, an echo of possible Sogdian influences sneaking westward, though that's for another night. Here, in China's frontier shadows, you feel the empire's pulse, steady yet secretive. Silk production was not just an industry, it was political theater, a stage where emperors curated an aura of mystical exclusivity. You trace a slow circle on your lantern-warmed shoulder, feeling the centuries-old tension between openness and monopoly. Suddenly, you remember an earlier conversation with a folk storyteller. She claimed that overworked silk spinners were offered opium-laced tea to calm their aching arms. Fringe accounts suggest the first opium dens arose near silk workshops, smoke rings mingling with the aroma of fresh cocoons. Historians still argue whether early opium use actually originated among silk artisans or arrived later through legal trade routes. You let the ambiguity float in your mind like a drifting cocoon, soothing yet slightly disorienting, perfect for bedtime ruminations. A breeze rustles the bamboo above, sounding eerily like hushed voices reciting imperial edicts. You smile, imagining a crowd of bureaucrats droning, "No one spins silk without a license. Hear ye," like sleepy newscasters announcing the weather with extra gravitas. You breathe in deep, inhaling the cool night air that tastes faintly of damp earth and forbidden textiles. Your eyelids droop as the local storyteller's laughter echoes, remembering that final joke she made. Silk threads measure tension in their tensile strength, but you measure tension by whether your eyelids remain open. With that, you settle into the hush of night, cocooned by layers of history's secrecy. China's imperial lockdown on sericulture wasn't just about cloth, it was about power, prestige, and a nation's desire to keep its most delicate secret wrapped tight. You rise before dawn, shoulders stiff from yesterday's march, and step onto wind-swept dunes that stretch like a pale sea before you. The air bites at your cheeks, Gobi chill at its cheekiest, reminding you that sand isn't only scorching hot. You probably didn't pack a parka, but here you are, hugging a camel's neck for warmth while its two humps rock you like a slow-moving cradle. Those Bactrian camels, first domesticated around 2500 BC, have been hauling silk across these sands for millennia, hardy pack animals whose thick fur repels frost and insulates against the blistering sun alike. As you sway along, the caravan's clinking bells become your metronome, a barely audible lullaby coaxing your eyelids toward a restful droop. The camels grunt softly. Beneath their heavy cloth saddlebags, each bundle stuffed with precious silken bolts homebound for far-off bazaars. Mainstream accounts note that by the 3rd century CE, these camels were the backbone of Central Asian trade networks, carrying up to 300 pounds of cargo over shifts that stretched for weeks without real roads. It's an impressive CV for a beast of burden, though it probably wouldn't get past HR today. 2 humps, 0 vacation days. Campfires flare at dusk, tiny lantern globes flickering like weary fireflies. You settle onto a low wooden bench carved with old Sogdian symbols, the wood still scented of pine resin. A fellow trader offers you a cup of thick, milky tea spiced with crushed walnuts, his grandfather's recipe for keeping frostbite at bay and a sore throat amused. You sip, feeling the nut oils coat your throat like a silk scarf, and savor the sharp sweetness that tames your shivers. Fringe tales say nomads once stuffed camels' nostrils with dried herbs so they breathed perfumed air, warding off nightmares haunted by lost merchants. Historians still argue whether those herbs were real botanicals or nightmarish hallucinations induced by cabin fever on endless dunes. Above you, stars blaze with reckless grandeur, unmuffled by city lights. You trace constellations born from Chinese astronomy, Ursa Major as the Northern Dipper, to guide your compassless route. Your feet ache from days of trudging, so you lie back against a saddle cushion and watch the cosmos swirl. A fellow traveler soon begins a ghost campfire tale. Centuries ago, an entire caravan vanished overnight, leaving only a lone camel tethered to a signpost. That camel supposedly wandered the dunes for weeks, bleating mournful tunes no human ear could understand. It became known as the Phantom Bactrian, and locals still claim its cry echoes in moonlit storms. You can't help smirking. If you hear phantom bleats, you'll know it's either a ghost camel or a drunk trader testing your insomnia. Your guide taps a lantern with a calloused finger and murmurs of nomadic rituals, red prayer flags tied to saddle horns to ward off vengeful desert spirits, and pilgrim beads made from yak bone, rubbed smooth by centuries of hands. You trace the beads between your fingers, feeling each groove like a heartbeat. A fringe rumor suggests that some caravans carried tiny, hand-carved ivory rattles hidden in silk pouches. When shaken, these rattles were believed to summon benevolent wind gusts, pushing the sand out of your eyes. Historians still argue whether those ivory charms really impacted weather or were a clever marketing ploy to justify higher caravan fares. The next morning, you awake to a surprise. Frost glazed the camel's nostrils, and your tea is a slushy cave of half-melted leaves. You groan softly, remembering you didn't pack gloves, but the frost is oddly beautiful, catching sunrise rays like thousands of tiny prisms. You tuck your hands into the hem of your coat, imagining it's lined with silk for comfort, which, in theory, would keep warmth in and wind out, if only you packed it. A passing mule driver jokes that if you can't keep warm by now, you probably shouldn't be here, eliciting soft chuckles that mix with the camel's exhalations. You resume walking, the caravan's shadow stretching long and thin across the glistening sands. Each dune crest brings new patterns, rippled waves sculpted by wind, as meticulous as any silk brocade. You pause to run your fingers through the sand, marveling at nature's own fabric mill weaving intricate designs under your fingertips. It's a mainstream observation that these dunes shift as much as 3 meters a year. The very route you follow might be buried next season. This thought makes you both wistful and grateful for the temporality of sand, unlike silk, which preserves the past in its threads. By midday, the sun's heat fuses with your fatigue, making the air shimmer. You catch a distant mirage of palm trees and mirth, tempting, but you know it's just light bending in sympathy with your longing for oasis. A merchant from Bork calls out, "Drink some camel milk, nature's Gatorade." You eye the wooden flask suspiciously but take a cautious sip. It's tangy, slightly sweet, and surprisingly refreshing. Fringe lore claims that early travelers discovered silk's tensile strength by twisting camel hair into rough ropes, accidentally creating protofiber tests that led to better camel yarn. Historians still argue whether camel hair ever truly influenced silk's evolution or if it remained a roadside curiosity for thirsty caravaneers. As the day grinds on, you reflect on the caravan's quiet camaraderie. Shared bread, exchanged stories, and the collective hum of animals keep loneliness at bay. You recall the caravan master's soft-spoken insistence that camels remember every dune they ever crossed, as if each animal carries an internal sand map guiding the column east or west. Whether that's a romantic exaggeration or a testament to camel cognition, you're content to let the question float unanswered, dissolving gently like sugar in tea. When the sun begins its slow descent, painting dunes in rose and amber, you approach your evening camp. Tender shoots of scrub brush break the monotony, promising water somewhere nearby. You notice a small, carved stone marking an old well's location, mossy and half-buried. That's a mainstream fact. Oasis markers dotted the desert, guiding traders to precious water sources. Yet a local whisper says at night, the well's reflection shows not the moon, but a phantom caravan wading through shadowed dunes. Historians still argue whether these legends sprang from deep wells or deeper fears of travelers losing their way home. You settle around the campfire once more, the stars now winking awake in a darker sky. Camels sway side to side, their silhouettes like ancient sentinels. You unwrap a piece of dried apricot, savoring its sticky sweetness as one last comfort before rest. A trader lightly strums a two-stringed fiddle, coaxing out a gentle melody that drifts into the night breeze, music that centuries ago might have accompanied Silk Road dances in moonlit courtyards. You close your eyes, letting the chill warmth of your blanket and the soft croon of the caravan's lullaby cradle you. Here, in the shifting sands of the Gobi, Bactrian camels carry more than silk. They bear the weight of stories, superstitions, and scholarly debates that hint at our eternal fascination with the unknown. As your eyelids flutter shut, the desert's hush wraps around you, weaving a dreamscape as delicate and enduring as the silk you've escorted across these ancient paths. You wake to the faint rustle of palm fronds overhead, their leaves brushing like soft fingers against your tense canvas. You stretch, savoring the cool pre-dawn breeze drifting down from distant mountains, laden with the scent of damp earth and date sweetness. The oasis town of Turpin sprawls before you, an emerald ring in the sand, its mud brick homes clustered around hidden water channels. You probably didn't expect desert life to hum like this, a gentle symphony of irrigation and conversation, but here you are, ready to trade nomadic dust for the soothing rhythms of an ancient oasis. You step outside and immediately notice the Carez system's whisper, a series of underground canals that deliver mountain meltwater beneath your feet, surfacing in cool stone wells every few hundred meters. A mainstream fact, these ingenious channels have sustained Turpin's vineyards and orchards for over 2 millennia. You run your fingertips along a smooth well wall, feeling the moisture seeping through, as if the earth itself exhaled relief. Historians still argue whether the Carez system originated under Han administration or evolved earlier through local ingenuity, but either way, you're grateful for its quiet generosity. A few steps away, palm wine flows in earthenware jars inside a low-slung tavern. You push open the wooden shutter and enter a dim room where lanterns cast dancing amber shadows on walls painted with grapevine murals. You probably won't remember all the details tomorrow, but right now, the room feels like a velvet cocoon. The host pours you a small cup of fermented date sap, thick, sweet, and headier than any fancy cocktail you've tried. Fringe lore insists that spilling a drop on the ground summons protective desert spirits, ensuring safe shelter until sunrise. Historians still argue whether such offerings predate Islamic customs or sprang up later as a clever marketing ploy. You raise your cup, whisper a silent cheers, and sip. If you think this palm wine will keep you steady, think again. You'll feel pleasantly unmoored by the time the moon rises. Refreshed, you wander toward the nightly market down a narrow street lined with mulberry trees. Vendors stoke clay braziers, the embers hissing as they roast walnuts and apricot kernels. You inhale the smoky sweet aroma, imagining it weaving into the silk bundles that pass through these stalls. A spice merchant beckons you closer, offering saffron threads and powdered licorice, luxuries that once fetched fortunes in far-off courts. He smiles and drops a fringe tidbit. An old family recipe blends crushed licorice with goat's milk to soothe desert coughs, believed to grant prophetic dreams of caravans yet to arrive. You tuck a small pouch into your satchel, curious whether you'll dream of phantom merchants or just sleep through the night. In the central square, musicians pluck rawhide drums and string deuter lutes, their lullabies drifting like prayers against the cool air. A dancer leaps across a low stage, her fringed skirt shimmering under lantern light, an echo of Sogdian influences from those early caravan routes. You lean against a wooden post, letting the melody lull your pulse. A nearby storyteller recites fragments of a Dunhuang mural legend. At certain times, the cave's painted Buddhas glow faintly, guiding lost travelers back to life. Fringe observers claim they've seen murals pulse with phosphorescence during humid nights. Historians still argue whether moisture electrical charges could cause such glow or if it's pure imagination stoked by heat and devotion. Either way, you shiver with anticipation at the thought of ghostly light in a cave. Leaving Turpin's vibrant bustle, you mount a small mule for the rocky trail to Dunhuang, 90 miles west. The path undulates through hills painted in stripes of rust and yellow, like a giant jigsaw puzzle assembled by the wind. As you crest a low pass, the crescent lake shimmers below, its jade water cradled by soaring sand dunes. You probably didn't think to pack a swimsuit, but the mirror-smooth lake beckons you to dip your toes, an unexpected oasis within an oasis. You trace concentric ripples in the water, imagining the caravans pausing here for prayers and grain trading long ago. By midday, you arrive at Dunhuang's bustling Yamen district, where officials once regulated caravan traffic and collected silk tides. You notice narrow canals fed by the Yellow River, lined with willows and reed-thatched huts. Here, paper scrolls flutter on drying racks, an early printing workshop powered by Marlborough-derived pulp. A fringe. Rumor flutters through the courtyard. Monks mixed powdered gypsum with silk fiber to sharpen ink pigments, creating the luminous colors of cave murals. Historians still argue whether these techniques arrived with Chinese artisans or were homegrown experiments in devotional art. You crouch by a sun-bleached rack, letting the faint chalky scent of paper and silk blend in your nose. As dusk falls, you follow lantern-lit lanes to the famed Mogoro caves, where Buddhas and Bodhisattvas gaze serenely from golden halos. Massive doors groan open, and inside, frescoes stretch across pillars and ceilings like elaborate tapestries. A mainstream observation, these murals date from the 4th to the 14th century, offering an unparalleled visual record of Silk Road cultures intermingling. The air is hushed, save for the soft echo of your steps on worn stone. You run a gentle finger along a carved lotus petal, feeling the centuries-old dust shift under your touch. From a distance, a caretaker's lantern bobs against the frescoed walls, illuminating a hidden niche carved for secret scripture scrolls. You slip inside, crouching as the lantern's glow reveals Buddhist sutras bound in silk covers. Fringe tales claim some scrolls were stuffed with protective charms, tiny silk dolls with jet-black eyes, to ward off nightmarish demons. Historians still argue whether those dolls were part of an official monastic ritual or homegrown folk practices. You close your eyes and breathe in deep, as if inhaling the echo of ancient chants vibrating in the cramped space. Exiting the caves, you wander back to the oasis edge, where an evening breeze carries the mingled scents of date palms, roasting apricots, and oil lamps burning atop mandarin carts. A local guide offers you a final palate cleanser, dried melon dust mixed with grape sugar, a sweet that once spurred caravans onward after days of parched throats. You pop a handful into your mouth, letting the granular sweetness dissolve like sand slipping through your fingers. Settling on a low bench beneath a date palm, you watch the town's shadows lengthen and merge. Crickets steadily tick off the passing hours as lanterns ignite in windows, one by one, tracing a constellation of human comfort against the dark. You remember the misty bamboo groves and the camels' hushed lullabies. Now, the oasis's gentle pulse, water flowing beneath stone, lanterns flickering in courtyards, carries you toward that twilight zone where history softens into dreams. You lean back, your fingers tracing the pattern of the wooden bench, knots and swirls like desert rosettes, feeling your mind unwind. In Turpin and Dunhuang, water diplomacy and palm wine rituals weren't just commerce, they were acts of communal poetry, weaving hospitality into every drop spilled and every lantern lit. Night markets and silent caves testify to a human yearning for both trade and transcendence. As the breeze cools your shoulders, you sense the lullabies of countless caravans, now at rest. Close your eyes, and let the oasis's hush cradle you, soft as silk, enduring as stone. You slip into Samarkand at dawn, the city walls glowing rose gold as sunlight filters through morning haze. The scent of freshly baked naan wafts from street ovens, warm, yeasty, with a hint of nigella seeds, beckoning you like a cozy invitation. You probably didn't expect a fortress of trade to greet you with breakfast aromas, but here the Sogdian merchants reign as both gourmands and silk middlemen. They've been the Silk Road's facilitators from roughly the 4th to 8th century CE, linking China, Persia, and Byzantium through a web of family-run trading houses. Mainstream scholars note that Sogdians spoke at least 5 languages fluently: Sogdian, Persian, Chinese, Bactrian, and occasionally Greek, to sweet-talk their counterparts into better deals. You weave through stalls where bolts of silk hang like pastel rainbows in the dusty air. A merchant named Marzuban greets you in chattering tones of Sogdian, then effortlessly switches to broken Chinese to demonstrate fabric texture. Feel, it's like butterfly wings, not itchy sheep. You stroke the silk, marveling at its cool resistance to heat. A fringe tidbit floats into your mind. Some caravans supposedly sewed tiny coded symbols into silk hems, musical notes, actually, to transmit secret price signals to fellow traders when no one else was listening. Historians still argue whether these silk sheet music patterns were genuine price codes or simply decorative flourishes misinterpreted by curious onlookers. Your guide steers you past families unloading spices and precious stones. Children run ahead, carrying clay cups of oat porridge and honeyed milk, giggling about who'll perform at tonight's caravan bonfire. You join them for a spoonful. Its warmth slides down your throat like a cuddle from the inside. Around you, Sogdian commercial courts unfold. Scribes in long robes tally silk yardage on parchment scrolls, their ink pots clinking like distant cymbals. Traders barter in languages you only half recognize, punctuating negotiations with theatrical hand gestures that could double as shadow puppetry. You remember the Gobi's silent dunes and Turpan's candlelit markets, but here the energy crackles. Samarkand thrums with deals, gossip, and hidden alliances. You wander deeper into a walled courtyard guarded by carved stone lions, one foot crushing a globe, as if to say, "We own the world's goods." Beyond the gate lies a small temple. Its mud brick walls streaked with fading murals depicting pilgrims and merchants side by side, making offerings at Buddhist shrines. A mainstream fact, these murals date to the 7th century and reflect the Sogdians' embrace of multiple faiths, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, and early Manichaeism, all coexisting in this crossroads. Inside, the air is cool and fragrant with incense. Flickering lamps cast shadows that play across painted figures garbed in silk robes, their faces serene yet oddly familiar. You notice one merchant figure bearing a silken purse at his belt. Locals whisper that some murals held coded congratulatory messages to powerful trading families. Fringe rumors claim hidden niches behind frescoes contained miniature mica mirrors, like medieval pop-up cards, projecting secret oaths among merchants who swore never to reveal each other's trading secrets. Historians still argue whether these niches were meant for practical storage or lodged only in the imaginations of later treasure hunters. A damp breeze lingers, carrying distant stall calls and the clang of copper scales measuring goods. You lean forward, brushing loose plaster to reveal a faded inscription, "To those who so trust, fortune shall flow." It feels as if the past itself is winking at you. Smiling, you tap your fingers on the sandstone ledge, recalling the carpet traders in Persia selecting dyes and the Nestorian monks carving chapel niches. The Silk Road wasn't just silk, it was an emotional ecosystem where trust, rumor, and devotional art wound together like strands of a single thread. Leaving the temple, you duck back into the marketplace's swirl. A spice vendor offers you cardamom-scented tea, steam curling into the morning light like paeans to comfort. You sip, noticing a fringe claim. Early Sogdian houses used musical camel bells not just to signal caravan approach but to coordinate trading sessions. Each clang corresponded to one of 7 recognized market districts, a built-in GPS system for the pre-modern world. Scholars still debate whether this practice existed or whether it's a clever metaphor spun centuries later by travel writers. You stroll down a narrow lane where leatherworkers stitch pouches from camel leather, pressing stylized road maps into each hide. Their hands move in practiced loops, as rhythmic as lullabies. One artisan chuckles, better than Google Maps, and no battery worries. You laugh, tucking that joke away for your next campfire yarn. Nearby, a group of scribes huddles over parchment pasted to a low table. You peer closer, they're drafting letters in elegant Sogdian script destined for distant markets, a mix of commodity lists and personal gossip about courtly fashion trends in Chang'an. Traders prized both the latest silken tunics and juicy rumors in equal measure. As midday heat stiffens the air, you duck into a dim caravanserai courtyard. The midday siesta blanket spaces in shadow and quiet, broken only by a cat's soft mew, an echo from that feline smuggler legend in China. You settle onto a low-cushioned divan, propped against a carved column varnished to a mellow patina. The hush invites narration. A merchant begins sharing tales of ice brought from Himalayan glacier and sold in Samarkand for royal sherbets, an early form of dessert diplomacy. Imagine, you pay a premium for snow, fissured like powdered silk, just to cool your throat in summer's fieriest hour. The caravanserai's ceiling arches vault overhead, decorated with complex geometric patterns in ochre and teal. You trace the star-like designs with your eyes, imagining each point as a city on a great network, Samarkand, Balkh, Merv, and beyond. A fringe notion drifts by. Some patterns contained hidden star charts predicting better caravan seasons based on celestial alignments. Historians still argue whether those patterns were astronomical guides or simply decorative marvels conceived by bored artisans. A breeze flicks through the courtyard's central fountain, its trickle sounding like soft applause. You lean forward, the fountain's cool spray misting your face with relief. Even here, in midday lull, the pulse of commerce hums. You overhear snatches of Greek, Middle Persian, and Turkic languages drifting over mosaic floors. Sogdian merchants truly embodied multiculturalism centuries before the term existed. As afternoon tilts toward evening, the outer gate swings open, and you see loaded caravans gathering. Camels and mules kneel to be saddled. Traders exchange hurried farewells. You rise, brushing dust from your robe, and follow the flow of movement back into the mosaic of dunes. You carry with you the taste of cardamom tea, the echo of business gossip, and that warm sense of human connection drawn across languages and miles. You pause at the city's edge, sampling a crisp almond biscuit sold by a child with rosy cheeks. The sweet crunch echoes like a punctuation mark after a long sentence of trade talk. As the sun dips low, painting the walls in amber glow, you glance back at Samarkand's silhouette, minarets, domes, and soaring walls draped in silent testimony to the Sogdians' legacy as the Silk Road's eloquent intermediaries. With every step into evening, you feel the whisper of those multilingual families trailing behind you, their voices woven into every rustle of wind-blown silk. And now, as the dunes beckon once more, you carry Samarkand's murmurs, a tapestry of tongues, trust, and temple secrets, fading softly into twilight. You leave Samarkand's amber glow behind and trace a narrow valley toward jagged peaks that steal the horizon. The air sharpens as you climb, each breath tasting of pine resin and distant snowmelt. You probably didn't expect to trade bustling bazaars for silent stone corridors, but here in the foothills, remote Nestorian monks carved a peaceful niche of prayer in the 7th century CE, bridging east and west through quiet devotion. As you trudge upward, you notice small chapels hewn into limestone cliffs, simple doorways framed by crosses carved so subtly they might pass for natural fractures in the rock. A mainstream fact: by the mid-700s, the Church of the East had established monasteries along these passes, ministering to traders and translating scripture into Sogdian and Yugur scripts. You pause to run your fingers over a faded inscription in Syriac, feeling the stone's cool roughness, like a whispered benediction under your fingertips. Inside one cave chapel, incense smoke curls around you in slow spirals, scenting the air with frankincense and juniper. The monks' prayer wheels stand lined against the wall, each wheel inscribed with silk scrolls of gospels and protective charms. Fringe law insists these scrolls were dyed with saffron and sealed in camel bone cylinders to preserve their potency. Historians still argue whether those saffron-dyed scriptures were liturgical necessities or a monastic branding strategy to outshine rival monasteries. You give a gentle spin to one weathered wheel. It's clicking a meditative metronome that feels oddly like ancient Spotify buffering. Deeper into the chapel, you crouch before a narrow niche where scribes once hid miniature manuscripts beneath painted lotus petals. You pull aside a curtain of cobwebs to reveal tiny silk-bound codices, their pages yellowed but intact. A fringe whisper claims some monks tucked protective prayers into their nostrils like early sinuses-infused aromatherapy, one sniff to banish bad dreams during lonely vigils. Historians still argue whether those nasal amulets were real or an imaginative traveler's tale, but the idea of monocled monks sniffing prayers is impossible not to smile at. Retreating to the open ledge, you cradle a mug of roasted barley tea, its bitter warmth a welcome antidote to the morning chill. Ahead, a ragged footpath descends to a mountain spring where merchants once paused to bless their loads. You kneel by the clear water, cupping its crisp flow to your lips. The spring's roar echoes in a nearby gorge, blending with birdsong to form a lullaby of stone and forest. You follow a line of worn footprints etched in dusty earth, evidence of countless pilgrims and traders guided by monastic hospitality. At midday, you arrive at a small courtyard sheltered by overhanging eaves. A monk greets you with a nod so subtle it feels like a half-remembered dream. He offers you flatbread baked on sun-warmed flagstones, dense, nutty, and unexpectedly satisfying. You nibble, noting a fringe detail. Villagers say the bread is kneaded at night by moonlight to capture lunar blessings, a practice some believe enhances spiritual clarity. Historians still argue whether lunar kneading was widespread or a poetic flourish attached to selective monasteries. Refueled, you explore a cloister of low stone cells lit by slivers of daylight. Each cell contains a wooden desk carved with book rests and an iron oil lamp stained by centuries of soot. You half expect to find monks in hooded habits scribbling under the lamp's flicker, but instead discover only silent echoes. A breeze rustles through an open window, carrying the soft clang of distant prayer bells, an auditory wink from history, reminding you that these halls once thrummed with daily psalms. Stepping outside, you gaze across the valley floor, where spring water trickles into terraced fields of barley and lentils. You can almost hear the monks chanting Compline at dusk, their voices weaving through wind-whipped reeds. A stray bleat from a goat startles you, a reminder that monastic life here coexisted with pastoral chores. A local guide once joked that monks' evening prayers were timed to goat feeding schedules, ensuring no goat went ungrazed while heavenly matters were managed. You smile, imagining bleating interludes in sacred services. Continuing uphill, you round a rocky knoll and find a solitary chapel set against a cobalt sky. Its exterior is bare except for a single cross etched above the doorway. You press your hand to the stone lintel, feeling grooves smoothed by uncounted palms. Inside, fresco fragments cling to walls, angels with flowing robes and stylized clouds, their pigments still glowing softly in dim light. Mainstream art historians link these murals to artisans who traveled from Chang'an, introducing Chinese brush techniques to Nestorian iconography. The effect is ethereal, a blend of fading ochre and gentle serenity that seems to hush your thoughts. Kneeling on a cushion of sheep's wool, you mimic the monk's posture, closing your eyes to the hush of stone and shadow. A solitary candle flickers at the altar, its flame dancing like a mindful heartbeat. A fringe rumor floats through the silence. These chapels once possessed a singing stone, a cavity in the rock that amplified whispered prayers, projecting them into the valley below. Historians still argue whether such acoustics exist naturally or if this tale was a metaphor for monastic influence spreading like sound. Waves. You test the theory, whispering a soft amen into the niche. It echoes back faintly, or perhaps it's just your imagination playing tricks in the hush. Chilled air nips at your cheeks as you stand, stretching limbs that have grown stiff on prayer mats. You trace your path back through whispering reeds, the valley's draft carrying your lightly hooted farewell to the monk's solitude. A last glance over your shoulder reveals the chapel's silhouette against snow-dusted summits, an enduring sentinel at the crossroads of belief and barter. Descending the pass, you recall the mosaic of merchants, camel trains, and desert oases. Here, at these mountain crossroads, Nestorian monks offered sanctuary and scripture to weary travelers, translating not only languages but cultures. Their hidden chapels and protective charms illustrate a human need to weave spirituality into every silk bundle and every stone pathway. As the sun dips behind the peaks, you fold back into the valley's embrace, carrying the faint echo of monks' chants and the scent of incense clinging to your coat. You realize these paths are more than trade routes. They are arteries of faith and fellowship, winding through rock and cloud. You emerge from the mountain pass into a courtyard lined with arches whose keystones support latticed windows glowing with afternoon light. Silk sacks no longer stain the dust. Instead, you tread on layers of Persian carpets so plush they cradle your footsteps like a down pillow for your soles. Safavid artisans perfected weaving as if dreaming, knot by knot. A stray breeze carries the scent of rosewater and sandalwood, surprising your senses with a welcome hug of fragrance that echoes the caravanserai lullabies you heard under the Gobi stars. Beneath your palms, yarns dyed in vibrant hues tell stories of sumptuous gardens and star-filled skies. Artisans steeped madder root for luminous reds, pomegranate rinds for golden ambers, and crushed cochineal insects for scarlet that rivaled a fresh pomegranate slit open at dawn. Indigo leaves soaked in vats gave robes and rugs a deep, liquid blue reminiscent of a desert mirage. Mainstream accounts note that dye workshops often lined riverbanks so runoff tinted currents pink or purple, a visual testament to human mastery over nature's palette and desert water's capacity for decoration. In the heyday of Shah Abbas's reign, around the early 16th century, Persian carpets became the ultimate diplomatic currency. Caravan trains threaded toward Istanbul, Moscow, and Madrid, bearing these textiles as state gifts. Embassies unrolled carpets in grand halls, declaring peace treaties with tassels and fringes. Historians still argue whether this royal favor truly birthed the golden age of weaving or merely accelerated techniques that had matured quietly for centuries. Whatever the spark, each knot in these carpets remains a footfall in world history, one that still resonates beneath your fingers. Yet not every detail was purely ornamental. Fringe lore insists that master weavers hid tiny talismans, charms of turquoise and bone, inside carpet warps. These secret tokens were believed to deflect scorpions, ward off plague-bearing winds, or ensure dream-filled sleep. Legend has it that families paid extra for carpets rumored to contain such protective trinkets, whispered to hum with silent guardianship when moonlight struck the wall just so. Whether these talismans were actual artifacts or romantic fables spun by traveling storytellers, you can't help but delight in the idea of a plush guardian watching over your slumber. Women held secret power behind the looms. Matriarchs of weaving guilds in Isfahan and Kashan managed entire floors of rooms, their sharp eyes distinguishing color inconsistencies from across dimly lit rooms. Some workshops operated through the night, lit by oil lamps balanced on copper trays to prevent sparks. Fringe accounts suggest these matriarchs developed an eye so keen they could spot a misaligned knot at 10 paces. Historians still argue whether these women's contributions were fully acknowledged by court chronicles or intentionally sidelined in official records. Just beyond the loom halls, the air grows heavier with perfumed incense and distillation fumes. Ceramic stills bubble with rose petals, jasmine blossoms, ambergris trimmings, and the occasional essence of sandalwood. This is the realm of attar, fragrant oils more revered than any grape must in the king's cellars. You lean over a copper alembic and inhale deeply, the scent blooms in your chest like a tender gesture. A single flask of pure rose attar required thousands of blooms and dozens of distillations, making every drop a rarefied treasure. No porter could haul this liquid gold without fear of being waylaid by perfume-hungry thieves. Among the attar legends, one tale persists. A rare night-blooming flower found only in hidden valleys emitted such potent aroma that guards posted outside perfumers' caravans lost track of time and direction. Whispered stories claim courtiers collapsed into enchanted slumbers just inhaling its smoke, leading to impromptu nap tournaments in palace gardens. Scholars still argue whether this flower truly existed or belonged to court poetry. The idea of scent so strong it could reshape fortunes blends absurdity with a sweet tingle of possibility, cotton candy for the mind. Every carpet here seems to shimmer with more than wool. Some threads glint with powdered gold or silver interwoven into borders, reflecting lantern light in dancing patterns. Fringe anecdotes propose that weavers mixed crushed gemstone dust, turquoise fragments or lapis lazuli powders, into dyes, giving carpets a crystalline shimmer said to repel envy. Historians still question whether these gemstones were really ground for dye or if the sparkle resulted from metallic threads alone. Regardless, you catch yourself squinting at the shimmer, as if the carpet might ripple and reveal hidden messages beneath the surface. You recline atop a plush stack of carpets, leaning against bolsters covered in block-printed silk. The courtyard's mosaic floor reflects patterns from the rugs above, creating a kaleidoscope of shapes spinning across your vision. You roll a ceramic vessel between your palms. It contains essence of jasmine and cedar, a blend used to scent the king's chambers before sleep. Remember the ghost caravan legend under the Gobi stars? Here, incense gifts replaced ghost tales, inviting protective spirits to lounge in scented shadows, a gentle lullaby for anyone who might wander in darkness. A soft murmur rises, a group of merchants negotiating over attar shipments and silk bolt counts. You catch snatches of Persian, Uzbek, Turkic, and a hint of Greek, an echo from the Sogdian tongues of Samarkand. Deals are sealed with a flourish of scented tassels, each color signaling origin and quality. You recall the Nestorian monks' prayer wheels in mountain chapels, spinning to bless traders. Here, too, The hum of commerce weaves through every rug stall, perfumery, and courtyard fountain, uniting faith, fashion, and fragrance into a single caravan hymn. As twilight deepens, lanterns ignite their jeweled hues, casting rippled reflections over carpets arranged like islands in a sea of flagstone. You sip rosewater sherbet, its cooling sweetness a final note after the aromatic symphony. The brittle pastel ice melts on your tongue, easing every trace of heat and heightening the lingering scent from the day. Each breath is a verse in Persia's sensory poem, woven, distilled, and savored, drawing you toward that soft brink between wakefulness and dreams. You stretch out on a royal cushion we've blasted with clear azure and coral motifs. The wool caresses your skin, whispering of distant caravanserai and the unseen hands that knotted each strand. You feel your eyelids grow heavy as golden dust from ancient dye pits coats your thoughts. The artistry and alchemy of Persian carpets and perfumed oils cradle you in a scented tapestry of human creativity, too exquisite ever to truly slip away. Sleep descends gently as you drift, the plush fibers and heady attar wrapping your senses in layers of fragrance and color. The debate over origins and techniques fades into soft murmurs, leaving only the simple truth. This fusion of art, trade, and alchemy transformed humble wool and petals into wonders that still soothe human hearts. You leave the incense-laced courtyard behind, pressing westward toward the Tigris's winding ribbon. The road narrows from caravanserai arches to narrow reed-lined channels that guide irrigation water into new worlds of possibility. You probably didn't think those same canals that nourish date palms would also carry the pulp slurry for future pamphlets, but here you are, ready to trace paper's silent revolution from its Chinese cradle all the way to Baghdad's grand libraries. As dusk folds into night, you stumble upon the outskirts of Abbasid Baghdad, an urban sprawl of mud brick houses and bustling docks where ships unload silks, spices, and, surprisingly, fragile paper sheets. You duck into a low-slung building where water-powered hammers rhythmically pound a vat of macerating fibers. The head miller nods at you, steam curling off the vat like ghostly scrolls rising from a scholar's desk. A mainstream fact: after the Battle of Talas in 751 CE, Chinese papermakers taken prisoner shared their craft, establishing the first Middle Eastern mills. Inside the mill's dim interior, paddles stir cellulose pulp into a creamy porridge. You lean close, inhaling a tang reminiscent of wet linen and river pebbles. A fringe whisper suggests that alchemists once soaked pulp in mercury-infused solutions, hoping their manuscripts would transmute into immortality. Historians still argue whether these early experiments were secretive quackery or protochemical innovation. You imagine opening a letter one morning to find your grocery list glinting ominously, "Buy milk, collect eternal youth." You step into a drying room hung with long, uncut sheets clipped to bamboo poles. The papers sway like silent birds preparing for flight, their surfaces puckering in gentle waves. A worker flicks his wrist, and a sheet flutters free, landing softly at your feet. You catch it, feeling the cool grain beneath your fingertips, softer than papyrus, sturdier than parchment. Fringe accounts claim that some mills added camphor to the pulp to repel rodents and preserve text in the desert heat. Scholars still debate whether that camphor boost was widespread or a luxury reserved for royal decrees. Outside, the chatter of scribes drifts through a lattice window. You peer into an adjoining chamber lit by oil lamps balanced on shallow dishes, each lamp's glow reflecting off a polished inkstone. Calligraphers hunched over paper draft Quranic verses and scientific treatises, each stroke a meditation. A mainstream detail: the proliferation of paper made book production cheaper and faster, sparking a boom in libraries. You marvel that a device as humble as a buckling sheet could spark an intellectual wildfire. In a shadowed corner, you spot a battered codex whose silk binding peeks from beneath tattered leather. The librarian hushes you with a smile. This manuscript reportedly contains alchemical recipes for turning iron into silver, jotted in a tiny margin like a magician's doodle. Fringe legends claim these recipes were penned by Persian sorcerers seeking the philosopher's stone, hidden in dusty bindings until rediscovery centuries later. Historians still argue whether such marginalia represent genuine lost sciences or were playful scribbles by bored copyists. You lean your head back, letting the calligraphy's rhythm seep into your scalp. The lamp's flicker makes the ink shimmer like midnight puddles. A fellow traveler nudges you, whispering that some papermakers embedded tiny mica flakes into the pulp so manuscripts would sparkle by candlelight, an early attempt at page-turning special effects. You can't help but grin. If Hollywood had ancient papermakers, they'd probably complain about their reel-to-reel budgets. By first light, you cross the Tigris via a wooden pontoon, paper sheets bundled under cloth riding alongside silk bolts on flatboats. Boatmen haul cargo with creaky planks groaning under weight, carpets groan, paper groans, you groan too, stretching your stiff limbs. You sip a cup of date juice elixir offered by a vendor on the quay, its sweetness slipping down like a soft bookmark between chapters. Further west, you arrive at a towering stone hall, Baghdad's House of Wisdom. You push open massive doors inset with bronze that clangs like a gavel calling scholars to court. Inside, the scent of aging parchment mingles with beeswax polish. Shelves of papyrus rolls stand next to stacks of newly arrived paper codices, like a time-traveling book swap. A mainstream note, this institution gathered Greek, Persian, and Indian works, translating them into Arabic on the new medium of paper. Pulling a gently worn folio from a shelf, you discover minuscule silver leaf margins gleaming under a tilted lamp. A fringe assertion says that silver-coated pages were rendered in alchemical sanctuaries to amplify divine messages, reflecting heavenly light into mortal eyes. Historians still argue whether these silver illuminations were deliberate ritual tools or artistic flourishes that simply looked impressive. You trace the margins, feeling the faint granular texture under your nail. In a hushed corner, a scholar murmurs over a treatise on optics written on pale blue-dyed paper, a novelty rumored to reduce eye strain. Fringe reports insist that the dye was extracted from lapis lazuli waste, turning scholarly vision as clear as the skies above the Hindu Kush. Researchers still debate if this tinted paper was widely adopted or disappeared under the weight of more practical white sheets. As twilight gathers, you walk the library's high hallways, the faint echo of turning pages like a choir chanting in whispers. Candle sconces cast long, wavering shapes on paper-sheathed walls, a silent film of letters dancing toward oblivion. You pause by a window overlooking the Tigris, where loaded boats drift under lantern-lit sails like paper kites afloat. The swirl of history and debate, alchemy and artistry, drifts around you like dust motes in a beam of lamplit hush. Your eyelids droop as the call to prayer drifts across the river, merging with the rhythmic rustle of hanging sheets. You realize that paper's journey westward wasn't just a technological transfer, it was a conduit for every human hope, argument, and dream transcribed in ink. As you lean against the cool stone, the weight of uncounted manuscripts hums in your bones. You follow the road west from Baghdad's riverside hum into ever-drying air, where the land flattens into the broad basin of the Tarim. The sun feels low enough to tickle the back of your neck, urging you onward toward a cluster of sandstone hills streaked with ancient graffiti. You probably didn't expect to stumble upon a kingdom ruled by poets and scribes rather than sword-wielding warlords, but here, between dunes and dusty palms, the Yuga rulers of Kocho reigned from the 9th to the 14th century CE, turning these oasis towns into vibrant crucibles of art, script, and faith. As you crest a low ridge, you spy a series of caves carved into the orange rock face. Each cave entrance yawns like a silent mouth, offering refuge from the midday glare. A mainstream fact: these cave complexes near Turpin sheltered not only Buddhist murals but hidden Manichaean scrolls, texts that survived centuries of decay only because they were carefully sealed in clay jars and buried behind frescoed walls. You duck inside Cave 15, the air cool and scented faintly of guano and ancient pigments, as if the walls exhale the ghosts of scribes long gone. Your footsteps echo across stone floors pocked with pigeon droppings and shimmering mica flakes. You probably didn't bring a headlamp, but your eyes adjust to the dusk-like gloom, picking out faded images of bodhisattvas with eyes cast heavenward and a small niche set aside for a Manichaean shrine. A fringe tidbit floats into your mind: local. Legend says that some scrolls were written in ink infused with crushed beetles, intended to deter bookworms and actual worms alike. Historians still argue whether the pigment mix was a deliberate anti-pest strategy or simply an accidental recipe discovered by overzealous alchemists. You crouch before a narrow shelf carved into bedrock, where a broken clay jar lies half buried in dust. Inside, brittle scroll fragments curl like sleeping, hibernating caterpillars. You gingerly pick up a strip of silk bearing Manichaean script, vertical columns of crisp black strokes dancing across pale fabric. The scriptorium scholars of Kocho prized silk scrolls for their durability, a mainstream observation confirmed by fragments that still hold ink after 1,000 years. You run a fingertip along a swatch of golden silk, noting how its fibers glimmer even in the half-light, like memory threads refusing to fade. As you cradle the scroll, a narrow breeze drifts through a rear opening, kicking up motes of sand that swirl in ethereal halos around your head. You imagine the original monks sealing these texts for safekeeping during times of religious crackdown, an act of quiet defiance. Fringe rumors whisper that some scrolls were coated in donkey milk to give them a protective sheen, a practice so odd that later scholars couldn't decide whether it was a genuine preservative method or a culinary misunderstanding in the monastery kitchen. Historians still argue whether those milk coating recipes originated locally or arrived via Persian missionary circles. Your gaze shifts upward to the cave ceiling, where faint frescoes depict scenes of traders presenting silk bolts to ghostly deities, as if hoping the cloth's sheen would attract divine favor. You can almost hear the scratch of brushes and the chant of mantras echoing off walls, a soft cavernous chant acting like an ASMR trigger for the soul. A tiny bat flutters overhead, its wings brushing against the ceiling in a sound like an unzipped silk robe. You smile. If you ever needed confirmation that silence is overrated, this is it. Stepping back into the sunlight, you walk a narrow ledge around the hill, each footstep stirring up rust-colored dust that settles on your lips and lashes. The heat feels tender, like a gentle hand coaxing you to slow down. You pause at a sundial carved into stone, less a timepiece and more a ceremonial marker for seasonal rituals. A local guide once told you fringe stories of midnight scroll readings beneath the full moon, where monks flicked oil lamps to mimic starlight, believing that paper illuminated by moon-ordered fire granted visions of next season's prosperity. Scholars still debate whether those nocturnal readings were genuine religious rites or poetic exaggerations of late-night bureaucratic work. Continuing on, you cross a mosaic of date palms and poplar groves, the cool shade a reprieve after the open ridge. A mud brick palace rises ahead, its battered walls hinting at former grandeur. This was once the court of the Yuga Idikut, whose reign combined nomadic heritage with settled hospitality. You step through the courtyard, where a fractured fountain still trickles water-tinged green with algae. You cup a handful of that tepid stream to your lips, its mineral bite surprising you, almost like sipping a fortune of the earth itself. Near the palace's inner chambers, you discover a sealed niche in a corner wall. Its opening is obscured by a crumbling plaster panel. You press your shoulder into the weak spot and hear a muffled clink, as if the plaster reveals a hidden tin chest. With gentle teasing, you pry it open, revealing rolled bundles of paper scrolls tied with silk ribbons. These are Yuga language texts, diplomas, laws, and poetic anthologies. A mainstream note: these manuscripts illuminate daily life in the capital, from tax edicts to love poems extolling the merits of apricot orchards. You unwrap one delicate sheet printed in old Yuga script, the calligraphy looping gracefully like vines. You imagine a court scribe penning it by lamplight, his quill dripping ink in soft, purposeful strokes. As you leaf through lines of bureaucratic prose and verses about spring flowers, a fringe detail surfaces. Some poems were written in alternating invisible ink, one layer visible by day, another revealed only when rubbed with citrus oil. Historians still argue whether these dual poems were meant for private reading or simply early literary pranks. You test the technique on a scrap, rubbing a lime slice against the fibrous sheet, and a second stanza shimmers into view like a ghost rising from a pond. Down in the courtyard again, you taste a plate of dried apricots stuffed with walnuts and date sugar, a local delicacy once reserved for palace guests. The sweetness opens your senses, preparing you for the courtyard's main attraction, a pavilion where artisans once wove silk banners for royal processions. Threads of gold and crimson still cling to a single unfinished loom. You brush a fingertip across the silk warp, feeling faint vibrations, perhaps the echo of countless shuttles passing through, each shuttle carrying a promise of alliance and cultural exchange. The sky deepens to an indigo blue as you climb to a nearby watchtower for sunset. Below, the ridges ripple like ocean waves frozen in time. A soft wind carries the distant call of a marketplace opening for evening trade, vendors crying silk, spices, secrets. You imagine those cries echoing through the centuries, luring merchants and pilgrims alike to these crossroads. As dusk melts into night, you descend toward a small investor's house lit by lanterns glowing soft as candlelit amber. Inside, a slender scholar invites you to his study. Parchment scrolls hang like banners from the ceiling, and a low table holds several rotund jars of scroll fragments awaiting cataloging. He pours you a pale green tea infused with rose petals and lavender. You sip, letting the floral aroma bloom at the back of your throat like a silent poem. He opens a jar and lifts a scrap of paper embossed with Manichaean iconography, a stylized figure holding a lantern. The scholar explains that these fragments provide rare insight into a religion that once thrived here alongside Buddhism and Christianity. A mainstream point, Manichaeism spread widely across Central Asia before waning under later Islamic rule. Yet it survived in these hidden niches, its scrolls bearing witness to a pluralistic past. Historians still argue whether the Yuga state's adoption of Manichaeism was political pragmatism or genuine spiritual conviction. You lean back on a low cushion, listening to the scholar's enthusiastic whispers. His study's hush feels like an invitation to dream, as varnished wood and fading inks usher you toward slumber. Outside, a single lantern swings in the courtyard breeze, casting swaying shadows that flicker across ancient walls. You realize that these hidden scrolls are more than relics. They are threads in a tapestry of beliefs, languages, and ambitions, spooling through time in secret alcoves and cave refuges. You close your eyes, the scholar's soft voice trailing off as you drift into the hush of 1,000 buried manuscripts. In the glow of that lantern, the Yuga kingdom's hidden scrolls cradle you, whispering tales of faith and artistry that refuse to vanish under sun or sand. You step from the desert road into the vast ceremonial plaza before Chang'an's south gate, your boots kicking up fine ochre dust that drifts like silk motes in the morning light. You probably didn't expect a diplomatic mission to feel like a red carpet premiere, but here you are, part of an Abbasid envoy officially invited to exchange exotic gifts for imperial favor. Lanterns hang on vermilion pillars, swaying lightly as if nodding approval at your arrival. Pedestrians pause to stare, some whisper in Chinese, others in Sogdian, all enchanted by the sight of foreign banners emblazoned with crescent moons and turquoise stars. A mainstream fact: during the Tang dynasty, Chang'an welcomed dozens of embassies yearly, forging alliances with regions from Persia to Tibet through elaborate tribute rituals. You feel the hum of imperial order, palace eunuchs sweeping dust, silk banners flapping in sync with ceremonial drums, and palace guards in glinting armor forming a living corridor. As you advance, the envoy's protocol officer hands you a gilded wooden box inset with inlaid amber. Inside lie 6 jars of rare Arabian frankincense, each crushed morsel meant to perfume the imperial gardens. Fringe lore claims that some merchants mixed frankincense with powdered pearls to craft a heavenly dust that shimmered like stardust under lantern glow. Historians still argue whether that luminous incense actually existed or was a fanciful byproduct of court alchemy. You breathe in the resinous aroma, letting it settle in your chest like a velvet hug. The procession winds through the gate's massive archway into the city's grid of broad avenues. Shopkeepers sweep doorsteps and offer cups of barley tea sweetened with rock sugar, an impromptu welcome drink that warms your throat like a soft scarf against the morning chill. You raise your cup and murmur a polite ganbei, spontaneously mixing Chinese and your own tongue. A fellow envoy grins at you. Apparently, cross-border code switching is the first of many unspoken traditions here. You follow the column of officials to the Ministry of Rites, its marble steps worn smooth by centuries of tribute-bearing feet. Purple-robed magisters greet you with bows so precise they might double as shadow puppets. You present the incense boxes, which a senior dignitary accepts with ceremonious flair, gingerly placing them on a red silk cloth laid atop a ceremonial table. A thunk of gavel drums and the courtyard erupts in muted applause, official acknowledgement of goodwill translated into an invisible bond. Your mind drifts back to the Gobi's ghost campfire, camel lullabies and Samarkand's mug of spiced tea. This moment feels like their grand finale. The courtyard's carved stone lions look on, their open jaws poised between roar and smile, guardians of every gift, rumor, and subtle political gambit that has played out here. Between formalities, a delightfully fringe anecdote surfaces. Your Persian counterpart swears that, en route, he trained a dancing bear in Baghdad for the audience at Chang'an. This bear, resplendent in tiny silk trousers embroidered with geometric motifs, supposedly performs a series of pirouettes while holding aloft miniature bronze cymbals. Historians still argue whether the Tang court really applauded a cymbal-clashing ursine troupe or if this story bloomed later in travelogues to spice up dry diplomatic records. You almost expect the bear to lunge around a corner, demanding honey treats and a standing ovation. As the day unfolds, you're led through the maze of palaces to the Hall of Splendid Harmony, its jade roof tiles reflecting sunlight like a mirror sea. Silk screens divide the hall into chambers, each screen painted with lotus ponds and fluttering cranes. You can't help tracing a finger along the painted silk, its weave so fine that each stroke of pigment seems to float above the fabric. A eunuch glides by, his ornate fan rustling like a secret. He murmurs that the court expects further spectacle tonight. A banquet where sugar sculptures shaped like camels and pigs parade along tables of roast pheasant and spiced duck. You glance at your fellow envoys, their faces a gallery of eager anticipation. Food, after all, is another gift. Scholars note that the Tang emperors delighted in exotic dishes, from Persian pilaf flavored with rosewater to Indian ginger confections, but none so unusual as the rumored silk steamed chicken, where poultry was wrapped in silk cloth and slow-cooked in fragrant steam. French cookbooks claim that the cloth absorbed juices to be unraveled and worn as aromatic shawls. Historians still argue whether those recipes were real or poetic allegories about luxury so extreme it bordered on absurd. Afternoon heat settles in. You retreat to a shaded pavilion by an orchid garden, where a stream babbles over jade-faced stones. A court musician plucks the peeper, each note drifting over the water like a lilting breeze. You watch carp swirl beneath the surface, their scales catching light like tiny mirrors. It's almost too serene to remind you of the diplomatic stakes humming beneath every silk thread. Later, you join a group of Tang envoys from Khotan, Silla, and Jabin who swap tales of caravans and poetic missteps. One envoy laments that his translator accidentally praised the emperor's silk trousers instead of silk coats, leading to raised eyebrows and an offer of several tailor-made garments, an accidental wardrobe upgrade at the imperial seamstress's expense. You laugh softly, imagining a squad of palace tailors scrambling to measure an embarrassed diplomat. When dusk drapes the city in rose and indigo, the hall's lanterns ignite, their soft glow illuminating the courtyard's carved moon gates. You gather with the envoys for a private dance performance, no dancing bear in sight, but court acrobats contorting under canopies of lantern light, their silk ribbons tracing arcs in the warm evening breeze. The music's steady drumbeat and flute harmonies lull your thoughts into a gentle haze. As the banquet tables emerge, laden with platters of candied jujubes, spiced lamb skewers, and lotus seed pastries, you settle onto a low cushion carved with phoenix motifs. A server offers you a small ceramic cup of chrysanthemum wine, its floral scent rising above the clatter of conversation. You sip, savoring how the liquor's honeyed warmth slides down your throat like liquid sunlight. It's a reminder that, beneath the diplomacy and protocol, these moments are about shared humanity, broken by jokes about tangoing with bears and feasting on silk-infused poultry. Your gaze drifts toward the palace rise, where the emperor himself might be watching, hidden behind silk curtains. You recall earlier rituals where envoys presented tribute inside a lotus-strewn pond, stepping across floating platforms to place gifts at a stone dais. One misstep could spell diplomatic disaster. Your counterpart nearly tumbled into water once, triggering a ripple of startled laughter that echoed across the palace. Historians still argue whether that splash was an intentional comedic interlude or a genuine faux pas smoothed over by imperial grace. Night deepens, sounds dim to a low thrum, and you lean back on the cushion, the musk of scented candles mingling with the heady perfume of blooming night jasmine in a nearby garden. The final act unfolds, wine cups raised, you're invited to inscribe a goodwill poem on a hanging silk scroll, your brush tracing characters in fluid strokes that echo centuries of calligraphic tradition. Your poem praises the weaving of friendship across desert sands, an apt callback to every camel-borne caravan and marble-carved chapel you've encountered. As you lower the brush, lantern light flickers across your silk robes and the ivory railing, casting a quilt of shadows that feel almost like a silk cocoon drawing closed. You realize that these emissaries, rituals, and dancing bear legends are more than statecraft. They're the living tapestry of cultural exchange, sewn through with laughter, incense, and the gentle tension of protocol. You rise to leave, the courtyard's night air cool against your skin. A distant drum roll echoes beyond the gates, perhaps the dancing bear's cue, or simply a midnight announcement heralding tomorrow's arrivals. You tuck your poem into your sash, the characters soft under your fingertips. As you step back into the hush of Chang'an's night grid, you carry with you the glow of diplomatic harmony, the scent of frankincense, and the promise that tomorrow, Another envoy will cross those same gates, weaving new threads into the ever-expanding tapestry of the Silk Road. You leave Chang'an's lantern-lit streets behind and settle into a slow-moving caravan bound for the western deserts, where night bazaars bloom like flowers under starlight. You probably didn't pack earplugs, but why would you, when the first notes of a pipa float through camp like silk ribbons in the breeze? Those four-stringed lute melodies have traveled from Central Asia into China since the Han Dynasty, carried by musicians who doubled as cultural diplomats. Mainstream chronicles note that by the 7th century CE, pipa players were official members of imperial entourages, their reed soft tones smoothing political friction better than any bribe. As dusk bleeds into a canopy of indigo, you trudge toward a makeshift stage carved from sandstone slabs. Sand drifts around your ankles, whispering secrets of caravans past. The troupe gathers, 2 pipa players tuning their instruments, a tanbur strummer adjusting goat hair strings, and a small group of dancers draped in gossamer veils that catch moonlight like dew-laden spiderwebs. Fringe lore insists some belly dancers dyed their scarves with crushed beetle shells so every shimmy cast flecks of iridescent red dust across the sand, startling scorpions away in self-defense. Historians still argue whether those beetle scarlet tricks were actual pest control tactics or an early attempt at stage effects that went wildly over budget. You sink onto a low camel saddle reproposed as a bench, letting the cool night air wrap your shoulders. A soft drumbeat begins, its pulse mimicking a heartbeat tuned to 8-hoof rhythm, camel hooves, that is. The drummer, a corpulent fellow in a tasseled cap, rattles a frame drum so gently you could swear you're hearing your own synapses firing. You think, if my brain had a snooze button, this would be it. He winks at you, and you wink back, 2 tired travelers sharing a silent joke. The first pipa player plucks an opening riff, fingers gliding over frets like devotees stroking Buddha statues. Notes tumble into the night, each chord dissolving into ripples across the dunes. A dancer steps forward, her hips undulating in slow circles, the edge of her veil drifting across the sand in a silky sigh. You probably shouldn't admit this, but you get so hypnotized you momentarily consider napping right in the sand. After all, sand makes a pretty good mattress, according to at least one exasperated traveler who tried it and woke up with a face full of granules. Between songs, the lead musician announces the next piece is called Caravan at Twilight, a folksy tune that, rumor says, was composed by an itinerant minstrels guild in Bukhara. He quips that if you hear any off-key notes, it's the camels testing your patience, not the performers. A low chuckle ripples through the audience as a camel nearby snorts, possibly in protest, or because it's secretly critiquing the rhythmic timing. You grin. Most critics don't get out of the camel stable. The beat shifts. The tanbur player strums a syncopated rhythm that seems to echo the tentative steps of a dancer tracing circles in a desert trance. 2 more dancers join, tapping nimble feet against the sandstone slab. Their anklets chime softly, each tiny bell a friendly reminder that sound doesn't need to be loud to be commanding. You trace the pattern of the bell's echo, tick, pause, tinkle, like droplets in a slow-motion fountain. At this point, you've forgotten the day's dust and blistering sun. All that matters is the breathy melody stirring your mind toward calm. A fringe tale drifts into your thoughts. Some caravans employed musical camels, outfitting pack animals with tiny metal jingles so the column's movement sounded like a rolling orchestra. Historians still argue whether those camels really performed concert tours or if the jingly harnesses were merely a way to scare off bandits by feigning a larger troop. You glance at your own camel's harness. No jingles here, but promise yourself next time you'll audition its musical skills. As the performance drifts on, you lean your head back and let the night sky fill your vision. A firmament of stars spread overhead, Milky Way dust tracing the caravan's future path. You hum along with a refrain, rediscovering a childlike joy in a simple melody. You notice the peeper's neck glinting under torchlight, inlaid mother-of-pearl shimmering like a city of fireflies. It makes you wonder if the instrument itself might be awake, shivering with alicat excitement at the prospect of an adoring audience. Between sets, a dancer offers you a sip of tamarind water, tart and cool, its sweet tang surprising your parched throat like a quiet exclamation mark. You joke that tamarind is the desert's answer to coconut water, though slightly more tangy and much harder to crack open. The treble joiner chuckles, adding that tamarind also doubles as a digestive aid, so if you plan to feast later, you're prepped to avoid a sand stomach rebellion. Under a crescent moon, the final piece begins, a collaborative improvisation blending Central Asian lute motifs with Arabic makam scales. The peeper echoes plucked refrains as the tanbur weaves in ornate trills, while drums pulse a heartbeat that could double as a lullaby. Two dancers execute a duet, swirling veils around each other like giant silk blossoms opening in moonlight. You watch their shadows merge on the sandstone, a shifting tapestry of movement and melody. A gentle wind drifts through, carrying soft echoes of distant camel bells and perhaps a hint of frankincense still clinging to your sash. You let the breeze stir your hair, making you feel part of the performance, an audience and a performer all at once. You remember earlier stops, the scholarly hush of mountain chapels, the sweet swirl of rosewater in Persia, Paper's ghostly journey into Baghdad. Now, sound itself has taken center stage, spinning an auditory tapestry as delicate and intricate as any silk weave. The ensemble closes with a low, drawn-out chord that fades into silence like the final thread pulled from a loom. You feel a collective exhale, as if the entire caravan has just released 1,000 tiny sighs. The dancers bow, camels shift weight in contentment, or maybe impatience for bedtime, and the musicians tuck their instruments away. You blink, eyes heavy, as the desert night seems to lean in, eager to tuck you under its star blanket. You gather your belongings, brushing sand from your robe, and retire to your tent where the hum of sleeping camels and the distant echo of veils brushing sand lull you toward rest. The melodies still hum in your ears, and the image of swirling veils and luminous strings trails behind your thoughts like a silk tail. Before drifting off, you muse on the caravan's nightly concerts. They weren't just entertainment, but living bridges connecting cultures through song and dance. Instruments and dancers carried tunes across deserts and mountains, whispering stories that no written record could fully capture. As your eyelids flutter shut, you savor the last echo of the peeper's high note, feeling it ripple through your dreams like a gentle wave across a silk sea. You step off the dusty route onto a broad plain where horseshoe prints crowd the earth like scattered petals. The horizon shimmers under a high sun. This is the heart of the Mongol Empire, and you've arrived just in time to witness the Pax Mongolica in action. You probably didn't expect conquerors to double as peacekeepers, but here, under the Great Khan's decree, merchants travel unmolested from Beijing's outskirts all the way to the Caspian Sea. As you trudge alongside a columns of wagons, you notice riders in blue felt cloaks, imperial messengers known as yam riders, their steeds bred for speed and stamina. Mainstream accounts tell us that the Mongol postal relay system, or yam, featured way stations every 25 miles, stocked with fresh horses and provisions to ensure envoys and traders could cover up to 200 miles in a single day. You pause to sip cool water at one of those stations, feeling the breeze stir hay-scented dust into a lullaby of readiness. A local merchant shares a fringe rumor. Caravans often carried caged falcons perched atop lead chests filled with coins. The hawk's shrill cries supposedly spooked would-be robbers, and no bandit dared raid a caravan under the watchful gaze of a hunting bird. Historians still argue whether falconry really served as an anti-theft tactic or if those birds were simply symbols of status, flown for amusement between bazaars. You stroll under a wooden arch marking the entrance to Karakoram's trade quarter, ornate banners fluttering against grassland sky. Guards in lamella armor stand at intervals, stamping official passports sealed with the Khan's wax emblem. These tokens guaranteed safe passage. Any abuse of merchants incurred immediate fining or, at times, execution. The air carries the tang of roasted mutton from nearby stalls, interrupted by the occasional barked command in Mongolian, Persian, and Yugur, as if polyglot tongues were the empire's true lingua franca. Beside a rumbling cauldron, a cook stirs a fragrant stew of noodles and simmered marrow, pale steam curling upward like prayer smoke. You nip a spoonful, its savory richness anchors you to the moment after days of thin bread and satiny tea. A fringe detail drifts into your thoughts. Some caravan cooks stirred their stews with elderwood ladles carved from trees grown directly along trade routes, believing the wood soaked up protective spirits that infused the food with safety charms. Scholars still debate whether elderwood utensils were a genuine folk practice or later romanticism grafted onto the Mongol diet. You lean against a low stone wall where scribes tally passage fees, though under the Great Yasa Code, most merchants traveled without levi under the Khan's edict of free trade. You smooth a hand over the cool sandstone, imagining every carved tally mark as a promise of security. Historians still argue whether the Yasa was a written legal code or an oral tradition upheld by royal decree. Either way, you feel the empire's pulse, a looming promise of order in a world once roiled by banditry. A gentle wind rattles colorful prayer flags strung between poles, Sakascript verses in red, black, and blue. You recall how earlier traders hung silk bells on their wagons. Here, the flags flutter like muted bell chimes, weaving protection through every ripple. A merchant whispers that some flags were dipped in fermented mare's milk to ward off evil eyes, their sour scent deterring invisible spirits. Mainstream sources confirm that shamanistic rituals persisted within Mongol society, melding Central Asian nomad beliefs with Buddhism, Islam, and Manichaeism along the routes. Passing a circular pavilion, you spy a wooden chest of salt blocks. Mongol currency often included bricks of rock salt as barter. You break off a small piece and taste its mineral bite, marveling that something as simple as salt once underpinned entire economies. Fringe scholars still argue whether salt blocks circulated evenly or whether regional rulers hoarded them as strategic reserves. You tuck a fragment into your pouch, both snack and souvenir of this orderly realm. By late afternoon, you reach a stone bridge arching over a lazy stream, its carved railings worn smooth by hoof and foot traffic. Beneath the arch, a basin houses offerings, incense sticks left by passing traders to thank local gods for safe transit. You add a smudge of sweetgrass smoke, bowing your head. Some fringe tales insist those offerings appeased river spirits who controlled currents and fish migrations, ensuring merchants never ran dry of fresh water or sustenance along the Mongol silk lanes. Historians still debate if such local rituals were orchestrated or spontaneous folk supplications. You find camp at twilight under a grove of poplar trees, the grass tickling your ankles as you ease onto a felt mat. Camels munch on nearby brush, their humps swaying like gentle waves. A nomadic family welcomes you to their alley with Macron-whited yurt, where goatskin tassels drape a flapping flap, painting dancing shadows inside. You rest your head on a bolster filled with millet husks, inhaling the mixed scent of sheep's wool and faded dyes. Inside the yurt's circular nook, a visiting shaman lights a small clay lamp whose smoke curls around your shoulders. He murmurs prayers into a hollow horn, then offers you a slow-brewed tea spiced with wild coriander and rose petals, claiming it sharpens caravan vision and banishes nightmares of sandstorms. Fringe accounts note that some Mongol traders carried miniature prayer wheels strung with silk ribbons, spinning them against their chests whenever they sensed lurking danger. Scholars still argue whether those wheels ever moved gold inscriptions or if they were symbolic tassels tied during safe conduct ceremonies. The yurt's fabric walls glow amber from the lamp's flame, warming your cheeks as you lie stretched out on rich felt rugs. You recall mountain chapels' echoes and desert concert lullabies, but here, the hum of weighted peace rings strongest. The Mongol Pax didn't just open roads, it tethered distant towns with law and held them in a shared orbit of security. You roll onto your side, tracing patterns of the felt weave as if retracing the empire's map in tactile relief. As you drift toward sleep, you imagine caravans moving like slow rivers, each milepost a testament to the Khan's edict, no merchant left unprotected. Gentle hoofbeats thrumming beneath felt mats merge with your heartbeat, forging a lullaby of sturdy order and whispered prayers. The plain around you sleeps under a pale moon, and you, wrapped in the shadows of nomadic hospitality, feel cradled by a world held together by horseshoes, edicts, and silken prayers. You step from wind-battered dunes onto a creaking wooden deck, the sea breeze ruffling your robe like an excited cat. You probably didn't bring sea legs, but here you are aboard an Arab dhow bound for India, trading salty air for sand-swept trails. As the sails fill with monsoon winds, you realize that by the 11th century CE, maritime networks began to outshine overland caravans, carrying silk, spices, and stories in hulls richer than any camel's still bag. Mainstream accounts note that ships could haul 10 times more cargo than camel caravans and cut travel time by weeks, two advantages powerful enough to shift empire's economic gravity toward ports. You lean over the railing, inhaling iodine tang and imagining silk bolts snug in the hold, swaying like slumbering pilgrims. A seagull squawks overhead, as if cheering the dhow's progress, or maybe just demanding breakfast scraps. Below deck, sailors chant rhythmic odes to the wind, their voices mingling with the creak of timbers like an ancient lullaby. You trudge through narrow corridors, where barrels of tamarind paste and jars of cochineal-dyed red pigment lie side by side. Fringe lore insists that some captains sprinkled silk dust on deck at night to confuse lurking sea serpents, implying that giant marine worms preferred fish scales to satin. Historians still argue whether such tactics ever soothed superstitious crews or simply left silk threads tangled in hawse-holes. As dawn breaks, you emerge into a spray-fresh deck bathed in gold. Sailors haul on ropes, singing blessings to Allah or local sea gods, names blending like the spices they trade. The dhow's intricate rigging casts webbed shadows across the deck, your own personal spider playground, minus the actual spiders. You flash a half-smile, remembering the Gobi's ghost campfire camels. Here, too, myth rides along trade, whether on hump or hull. A merchant offers you a cup of cardamom spice tea, its warm steam curling around your fingers. You sip, the sweetness lingering like a soft echo. You note that junks from China carried compass technology and watertight bulkheads by the 12th century, innovations that made sea travel not just faster, but safer. Imagine camels wearing tiny life jackets. That'd be a sight worth trading your tea for a camera phone. As the dhow rolls gently, you recall caravans passing oasis markers dotted with wells. Now, each star and wave ridge serves as a guide. Sailors navigate by sun, stars, and the smell of ocean swells, an art as ancient as silk's first shimmer. A fringe whisper reaches you. Mariners believed certain moon phases transformed dolphins into protective guardians, shielding ships from shallows. Historians still debate whether such lunar lore guided voyages or merely inspired poetic sea shanties. You climb the crow's nest for a better view, the wind tugging at your hair like an eager toddler. Below, the vast blue stretches horizon to horizon, punctuated by foam-capped waves that rock the ship's timbers with lullaby consistency. You tighten your robe and smile. Nothing invites sleep like the gentle thrum of ocean cradle. Around midday, the dhow docks at a bustling Indian port, teak wharves lined with coconut palms swaying in time with distant tabla drums. You disembark onto wooden planks slick with salt and fish scales. Vendors shout in Malayalam, Tamil, and Arabic, offering fresh mango slices and crushed tamarind ice. You bite into mango flesh so sweet it could moonlight as dessert diplomacy. You wander through shaded bazaars, where Chinese porcelain sits beside East African ivory. Merchants haggle amidst the scent of turmeric and cardamom incense. A local spice trader tells you a fringe tale. A Portuguese caravel once sank off the coast with a hold full of silk and pepper, and to this day, divers claim to hear bells chime underwater, rings shipped as diplomatic gifts but never delivered. Historians still argue whether any European vessel lost such a treasure-laden cargo or whether the story set sail on waves of rumor. You board a larger Chinese junk for the return voyage, the hull's bulkheads rising like muted cathedral arches. Sailors hang lanterns from yardarms, glowing amber against the inky water. You head below to find silk bolts neatly stacked beside casks of fermented fish sauce, an unlikely but oddly charming combination. A mate winks and quips, "No need for detergent when fish sauce ages on silk, it's the vintage scent of the East." You laugh softly, remembering Persian attar and its courtly perfumes. Night falls and the junk's watchman calls the first of 3 shifts. You settle on deck with a swath of silk draped across your knees, its texture cool against the warm night air. The water slaps the hull in a steady beat, and you trace patterns in the silk that mimic crests and troughs. Above you, stars wheel with precise indifference, just like trade routes that curve with the Earth's rotation. You drift into a half-dream, the sea's gentle rocking blending with caravan memories, monks carving chapel niches in mountain passes, camel train lullabies, and the shimmer of Persian carpets in moonlit courtyards. Here, the ocean's verse joins the land's rhyme, a final debate unfolding. Did sea routes truly eclipse silk's overland reign, or did each network thrive in its own realm? Historians still argue whether the Silk Road ever really died or simply traded its desert boots for wooden deck planks. A lantern's glow flickers near your feet as a sailor tucks you into a hammock rigged between masts. You rise far more gracefully than you ever did on camelback, an unexpected bonus of seaworthy slumber. He hums a lullaby borrowed from Cindy Fisherfolk, a melody that could coax seaweed into dancing. You let your head rest against silk's soft embrace, feeling the deck's subtle sway pulse like a heartbeat. In that moment, you realize that land and sea trade weren't rivals but dance partners, one weaving its way across dunes, the other gliding over waves. Waves, after all, just Earth's knees bent in a gentle bow. As the dhow slips beneath the moon's silver arch, you surrender to the rhythmic push and pull, silk against wood, memory against dream. The ocean's hush is softer than any desert breeze, and as you close your eyes, you feel the myth of the sunken caravan slip beneath the tide, leaving only the hush of salt and silk to cradle you into the deep. You leave the steady rhythm of merchants and camels behind, stepping into stretches of sun-bleached track that feel deserted by time. You probably didn't imagine that once bustling caravan arteries could fade into whispers, but centuries of conflict and shifting empires turned overland routes into near-forgotten ruins. As you trudge through crumbling way stations now reclaimed by sand, you feel an echo of their former bustle, mule bells and barter calls reduced to a gentle breeze surveying empty doorways. By the late 14th century, the Pax Mongolica collapsed under internal strife and plagues, mainstream historians explain, fracturing safe passage for traders and sending many caravan routes into disuse. These thoroughfares, once the world's busiest highways, gradually slipped from collective memory as new maritime networks stole the limelight. You run your fingers over a toppled milestone stone, its inscriptions half eroded, marking distances to cities that no longer sent emissaries. You imagine weary travelers missing these markers, wandering until the dunes swallowed them whole. Centuries pass. Empires rise and fall, and the silk routes lie dormant beneath desert sands and mountain talus. A fringe tale floats into your mind. Local shepherds once found jars of silk hidden in secret cellars and used the glossy fabric to patch their tents, unaware of its storied past. Scholars still argue whether these discoveries sparked early interest in relic hunting or simply led to oddly luxurious nomadic shelters. You chuckle at the thought of a shepherd family snoozing under kites of silk scraps, perhaps dreaming of imperial courts. In the early 19th century, European adventurers, armed with curiosity rather than caravans, began trekking into Central Asia's heartlands, determined to map lost corridors. A mainstream account names Sir Aurel Stein and Sven Hedin as pioneers who charted routes from Kasha to Samarkand, guided by fragmentary Chinese pilgrims' diaries and weathered Arab geographies. You trace Stein's compass route across the ground, noting how modern steps echo ancient footprints. As you crest a small dune, you spot the weathered remains of a caravanserai, once a grand oasis in isolation. Its broken arches stand like silent sentinels, guarding nothing but wind-carved passages. A fringe rumor suggests that Hedin's parties discovered hidden chambers beneath similar ruins containing scrolls sealed in clay, texts so delicate they crumbled at the slightest breath. Historians still argue whether those secret chambers were genuine or misinterpreted Canat maintenance tunnels mislabeled by eager explorers. You kneel to inspect a collapsed cistern lined with cracked plaster, once part of a Carrez system feeding weary travelers. Mainstream archaeologists date these water channels to the 10th century, evidence of sustained oasis life long after Mongol rule. You cup your hand and pour a trickle of stale water across the plaster, watching how it beads before seeping into porous stone. The Carrez's ghostly whisper reminds you that infrastructure outlasts empires, its silent service rendered long after traders moved on. Further along, a line of blunted mileposts emerges, their raised script half-faded. You brush away grit to reveal Chinese characters marking 40 li to Khotan. You probably wouldn't last a day as an imperial courier reading these stones in full sun, but tracing their inscriptions gives you goosebumps. Fringe speculation holds that some markers hid miniature reliquaries, tiny clay boxes concealed within, containing prayers for safe passage. Scholars still debate whether any reliquaries have ever been found or if they exist only in travelers' lore. As afternoon shadows lengthen, you follow a narrow ridge where faint wheel ruts carved by antique wagons run parallel to goat tracks. You run your palm along one rut silhouette, its groove worn by centuries of iron rims and leather wheels. Mainstream studies confirm that some ruts run continuously for over 100 miles, a testament to astonishing trading volume before modern railroads. You close your eyes, letting the sun's warmth cradle your shoulders and imagining those early chariot horses' rhythmic hoofbeats. The sun dips low as you enter an abandoned fortress once garrisoned to protect silk convoys. Cracked battlements overlook nothing but shifting sands. A fringe anecdote claims that early explorers found graffiti scratched into the inner walls, love poems and doodles by bored guards, in scripts from Persian to Tocharian. Historians still argue whether these inscriptions date from the fortress's heyday or were carved by 19th-century souvenir hunters. You press your ear to a half-standing turret and hear only the sigh of wind. Night settles in soft swaths as you light a small campfire beside ruined walls. You spread a tattered silk fragment you discovered earlier on a rock, letting its fibers catch the flicker of flame. Around you, the desert skitters with tiny scorpions and silent lizards seeking the night's cool. You wrap your coat tighter, noticing how even a scrap of silk can warm you against the desert's chill, a gentle reminder of the route's original lifeblood. By the glow of your fire, you draft rudimentary sketches of the terrain, echoing the methods of early cartographers who restored these pathways to modern maps. You plot ravines and hillocks, waterholes and mileposts. Maybe your crude chart will guide a future traveler, just as Stein's notes guided you. You probably won't survive if you rely solely on your scribbles, but the act of remapping feels like rekindling a lost communion across centuries. As embers settle, you lean back against a mossless stone, gazing upward at unfamiliar constellations that guided ancient caravans. You remember how maritime routes siphoned trade toward ports and how shifting power centers sealed overland paths in obscurity. Historians still debate whether the Silk Road ever truly vanished or simply retreated until human curiosity reawakened it. You feel content leaving the question hanging, like an unsolved riddle whispered by the dunes. Finally, you let sleep find you, lulled by the crackling fire and the desert's hush. The old roads may lie in ruin, but their stories, carried on the wind, cradle weary souls who wander in search of echoes. In your dreams, caravan bells ring again, guiding you along reclaimed trails that win toward tomorrow's rediscoveries. You awaken gently to the distant buzz of traffic instead of camel bells, under a sky diluted to concrete gray by the city's glow. You probably didn't expect the Silk Road's ghost to greet you as postmodern crosswalks instead of caravans, but here you are in Samarkand's UNESCO-listed old city, where medieval lanes now host a marathon. Runners in numbered bibs file past ancient madrasas, tracing a 42-kilometer loop pegged to historic waypoints. A mainstream fact: the Samarkand Marathon, established in 2010, follows paths trodden by merchants for 2 millennia, drawing thousands from across the globe. The starting gun cracks faintly like a distant drum, and you step onto pavement once worn smooth by camel hooves and leather sandals. You feel the mingled pulse of history and modern breath all at once. Your first steps take you across Registan Square's tiled courtyards, where turquoise mosaics glint under muted sunlight. Cheering crowds line the walls, some clad in traditional robes, others in synthetic tracksuits emblazoned with corporate logos. A fringe tidbit drifts through your thoughts. A local organizer once tried releasing doves at the start line to symbolize peace along the ancient trade route, only to have them veer off toward a neighbor's kebab stand, triggering an impromptu poultry pursuit before the race even reached a mile marker. Historians still argue whether that story is a quirky footnote or simply a made-up legend concocted by marketing teams to attract viral attention. Moving past the square, you join the marathon column as it winds into narrow lanes that once saw caravans laden with silks and spices. Street vendors hand out bottles of saffron-infused water, an homage to medieval dye exchanges, its warm sweetness caressing your throat like a lullaby. You pause to sip, feeling droplets slip gently down, and watch as volunteer medics drape embroidered silk scarves over exhausted runners' shoulders for warmth. It's a poignant display. Silk, once a luxury for sultans and envoys, now a source of simple comfort at a community event. Historians still argue whether early Silk Road travelers prized saffron more for flavor or fabric, but here, both scents mingle in a gentle caress of memory. You loop around the perimeter of the Bibi Khane Mosque, its massive portal still flanked by shattered columns echoing caravanserai arches. A nearby scorekeeper announces that marathoners have just passed the old octagonal bathhouse, where silk-made hammams once girdled traders dripping in dust. Fringe accounts claim modern reenactors recreating those baths tried layering silk curtains soaked in rosewater, only to find the fabric so heavy when wet that their historic bathing ritual collapsed into a soggy tangle, eliciting laughter and a few mudded robes. Historians still argue whether hammam silk curtains ever served practical aromatic functions or remained purely decorative in palace baths. Leaving the city, the race course skirts the gentle bend of the Zarafshan River, its banks lined with willow trees grafted in medieval Carrez water. You join local children trailing marathoners with colorful flags, and the jubilant shouts blend seamlessly with the water's murmur. It reminds you of earlier nights in Turpin's oasis markets, where lantern-lit currents hummed like lullabies beneath your tent. Here, too, water diplomacy persists in bricks and brush, only now, it flows through modern pipes alongside ancient Kanat tunnels. A mainstream note, Samarkand's modern water system still relies on the old network of underground canals, sustaining gardens and fountains as it has for centuries. You pause at a roadside marker mimicking an old caravan milestone. It stands polished stone now emblazoned with sponsor logos instead of dusty inscriptions. You trace the edge with your fingertip, and the clean lines surprise your skin, as if you've replaced a weathered stone with a fresh postcard. You remember Section 14's toppled milestone half buried in dunes, and you can't help a slow smile at the contrast. Fringe rumors say some sponsors offered cash prizes in ancient coins, replicas minted by local artisans, but reviewers still debate whether those coins ever held real value or were just novelty souvenirs to lure influencers and hashtags. Your route then sweeps into a recreation of an 11th century caravanserai near the city outskirts, built in collaboration with an international heritage foundation. Within its high walls, festival performers recline on ornate carpets and reenact the marketplace's hush. You enter through monumental wooden doors engraved with stylized silkworms, greeted by the scent of burning tamarisk wood and cardamom. Children dressed as Sogdian merchants barter fabric scraps with festival-goers in exchange for modern trinkets, rubber bracelets etched with Silk Road 2025. You could linger here for hours, watching cultures fold over one another like fine pleats in a skirt, but the race's final stretch beckons you on. Runners surge forward, weaving through the faux archways and onto open road again, while locals donning velvet coats and embroidered hats perform a farewell dance, an homage to Tarascan camel greetings. Fringe anecdote: at last year's festival, one dancer's headdress slipped mid-spin, startling a passing runner into an inadvertent mid-race tango that ended with both applauded by onlookers. Historians still argue whether such improvisations match any documented practice or if they are spontaneous flourishes that have become tradition in their own right. You finally round the last bend, stepping onto the enameled courtyard inside the new Silk Road Museum. Its glass walls reveal exhibits of digital reconstructions, VR caravans, and 3D printed camel models, an unexpected merger of tech and antiquity. You probably didn't envisage the Silk Road as a virtual playground, but here, holographic silkworms crawl along a table, and you reach out to let one slither across your palm in simulated warmth. A mainstream fact: since 2018, the museum's VR demos have attracted over 50,000 visitors, eager to experience a caravan's hush without the dust. Historians still argue whether virtual reconstructions can convey authentic environmental context or simply offer comfort-layered approximations of the past. You cross the finish line marked by an illuminated sofra table laden with Samarkand plov and apricot pastries, a triumphant reminder that food remains the universal gift. Volunteers drape you with a simple silk stitch finisher's medallion, and the cool fabric on your chest feels like a friend's embrace. Memories from Section 2's imperial lockdowns and Section 7's fragrant dye villages flash in sequence, weaving decades of stories into this moment's simple joy, community, memory, and a shared path. As you step away from the museum, you inhale one last breath of saffron breeze mingled with exhaust fumes under an overcast sky. You realize that the Silk Road has never really ended, it simply adapted, shifting from camels and junks to marathons and museums, from secret scrolls to digital apps. The ancient debates continue. Historians still argue whether the road's true endpoint was Venice or Zanzibar, whether trade or culture defined its course, but perhaps the real endpoint lies wherever people pause to trace the old path beneath their feet. In the hush that follows, you settle onto a nearby bench in the Silk Road Museum's softly lit foyer, your fingers tracing the cool edge of the silk medallion draped around your neck. The fabric lies against your skin with the gentle weight of forgotten centuries, urging your thoughts to slow into a deeper rhythm. You inhale lightly, letting the muted hum of air conditioning blend with distant murmurs of other visitors, each drawn here by curiosity or nostalgia. You feel safe, cocooned in the layered comforts of history and human connection. The museum's glass panels reveal a night sky where city lights mimic ancient caravan lanterns. You watch as passing cars leave trails of amber in the reflective panes, echoes of camel bells and spinning prayer wheels beneath them. Your heartbeat eases, finding a steady lullaby in this soft interplay of past and present. You probably didn't expect machines and modernity to cradle you so tenderly, but here, in the gentle glow of corridor lamps and interactive displays, the Silk Road spirit whispers reassurance rather than mystery. You close your eyes, recalling memories, the hush of mountain chapels, the clink of caravan bells under Gobi stars, the peeper's final chord fading into desert night. Each vignette drifts like a silken thread through your mind, weaving into a tapestry that warms your chest. There's no hurry now, no demands on ankles or lungs, only the quiet pulse of shared heritage and soft, inhaled breaths that carry the faint scent of saffron and rosewater from earlier festivals. Your eyelids feel weighty, pressing together in sync with the calm thrum of the foyer's overhead lights. You let the bench cushion cradle your back, and a peaceful ease settles into your limbs. You're home, at least for a moment, in this luminous space where echoes of traders, monks, and dancers mingle with modern footsteps. You drift, assured that these roads of memory wind on beneath every heartbeat. Rest here a while longer. Feel the silk's warmth and the hush of countless footsteps guiding you toward dreams. Sleep will come on soft vibrations, like dunes shifting in moonlight or pages of virtual scrolls turning. And when you wake, the Silk Road will still stretch before you, waiting for your next gentle step.